And welcome to this edition of the Leadership and Mental Toughness Forum podcast.
And welcome, John. Very good to see you again.
Hello, Claudio. Good to see you as well.
And of course, this is the podcast for leadership, ownership-driven leadership and mental toughness. And you're an ideal person to speak specifically on mental toughness, given an interesting fact that you're the first person to run across the continent of Africa.
Yes, the width of Africa.
Width of
Africa. A lot of people say to me, did you run north to south? No, it was across the width of Africa. And I can explain to you that it was across Namibia and across Botswana, South Africa, and Mozambique. It was at that latitude.
Yes. And of course, a former naval officer.
Yes. Lieutenant Commander.
Now, about the run, which is focusing on that, there's so much to unpack there and so many lessons. Could you share the pivotal moments or inspiration that led to your decision to run across Africa to raise awareness for elephants and water sustainability?
Sure. Well, that's an interesting story because it was a group of what I call synchronistic events that happened, and I'll share them with you. So I was sitting at home in the kitchen counter between the kitchen and the lounge, and I was waiting for the sister of one of my daughter's boyfriends, who was going to come and stay at my place while she was in Cape Town attending a conference. And whilst I was waiting, I was also thinking about what I was going to do with myself in life. I was sort of in between jobs, if you like. I had moved from being an IT project and program manager to being a life coach. And I was in between those two, and I was thinking about what my strengths were. And at the same time, I suddenly realized that in the cupboard of the young lady who was going to come and stay with me was a box of wine. And I thought, oh, well, let me clear that out in case she wants to put her clothes in the cupboard. And then when I emptied the wine out of the box, there was this magazine, which I never normally read, but I had some time to spare, so I started reading it. And there was an article, a one-page article about a lady called Patricia Glynn. Now, Patricia Glynn walked from Durban to Victoria Falls in the footprints or in the path of her uncles, just a matter of interest. And she's done many, many other good things with dogs and with the San. And in the article, I read that she was considering walking the elephant corridor across Africa. And that sparked my interest because I have an affinity for elephants. And then a little bit later, she also said in the article that one of her other possible projects was to kayak around Mozambique. A little bit later, my daughter's friend arrived and she brought me a gift. And the gift that she brought me was a chap called Rian Mansa's book. He had got a little bit bored with life and he had just suddenly upped and waved goodbye to his girlfriend and just for fun of it cycled around Africa. And that was what his book was about. But also in his book, he said that his next project was going to be to kayak around Madagascar. So I thought, well, I like the Patricia Glynn story, and I contacted her and I said, Patricia, there's this chap who's also planning to do a kayak around Mozambique. I hope it's not going to rain on your parade. And by the way, having previously considered what my strengths are, which are networking and mental strength and my fitness, I said, would you consider running the elephant corridor? And that's where the idea was born for me to run the elephant corridor or run across Africa in support of elephant conservation. The idea of water sustainability came a little bit later in my discussions with WWF, who would explain to me that they don't directly support species, they would support the sustainability of the planet. I mean, there's no point having lots of elephants if you don't have a planet for them to live on. So that's how the water came in at a later stage.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's one way to look at it, is taking a systems view.
Yes.
Without the water, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thank you for
Well,
sharing.
without the water, the planet and the people and also elephants won't survive. So there's a good connection between all of those.
Yeah, most certainly. Now, your run spanned across diverse landscapes and countries. You touched briefly during the introduction when you mentioned the countries. But could you describe some of those memorable challenges that you encountered, which no doubt there are many? And just to pick a few that stand out in your mind, the rest we'll wait for your memoirs. And
Okay.
the challenges that your team faced during the expedition, both logistical, but also from a personal point of view.
Yes, well, sure. Let me first get out of the way one that people often ask me, especially people who don't know Africa all that well. And they always say, wasn't it dangerous? And interestingly enough, they're mostly referring to people. So no, it was only really dangerous at one point where we were running through a nature reserve, and we'd been given permission to do that. And we were running. When I say we, I had a support runner with me, and of course the logistics team who accompanied me. And we were running very close to a lion kill, in fact, within 50 meters of a lion kill. And we saw all the vultures sitting up in the tree. And we didn't have weapons with us, interestingly enough. The only weapon we had was a paint gun. You know, this paint gun exercise with a little rubber or plastic pellets of paint. So that was the only really dangerous thing. Then we had the lion spoor through our campsite. So they had been very, very close to us. But as far as people were concerned, there was no danger. There was a lot of interest, of course, and we were running through villages, and all the locals would come out and wave, and the children would run after us. And there was one incident where we had a bicycle with us, and we were sort of approached in the middle of the night. Someone wanted to steal the bicycle, but that was only one. It took 3 months, by the way, the run. Running a marathon every day pretty much for 3 months, and we only had one incident like that. The other things that we encountered which were difficult, as you mentioned, was the logistics. We as I was running, and I would run roughly 35 to 42 kilometers every day, we had to be careful of where we camped, because across all the villages there are headmen, and they own the area, and we had to go and ask permission. And then not only did we have to camp, we would pull off the side of the road and pitch tents on the side or in the bush, or we also needed water. Now, for instance, across the entire span of Namibia, which was about 1,100 kilometers, we didn't see water once. So the logistics team had to travel to go and find fuel and water and food. And then they had to be able to travel back to the campsite, and they didn't need to do too much traveling back and forward to get the water that we needed. So, for instance, one of the challenges that we faced was, strangely enough, it was exceptionally cold. It's the coldest I've ever been. Waking up in the morning, there was 2 inches of ice on top of the water in the bucket that we'd used. So for cleaning ourselves and for cleaning the kit that I was running in for cooking, we had to boil water on a fire, on an open fire, and then mix that with a couple of liters of cold water out of the tanks of the vehicles that we had with us, and then stand in a bucket, a plastic basin, and then I'd stand on my running kit and wash with a flannel and or a face cloth, as people would call it, and that was the only water that we had. So we had water was very, very sparse. So logistics was quite an issue, and so that also had an effect on where we planned our route. We couldn't just run anywhere. We had to run along a certain route, and so there were those issues. Nothing. I mean, we nearly ran out of tea bags one day as a bit of a joke. I mean, we didn't have any major hurdles. The major hurdles were, of course, physical and mental, to be able to finish the run, endure what I was enduring every day. As any marathon runner will tell you, whenever you get to the 30 or 36 kilometer mark, you hit the wall, and it's pretty much unavoidable because your body's run out of juice and energy and food and fuel to burn. And so it starts getting really painful. And then every day your mind just has to tell you that you're going to do it. One of the things that's quite fortunate for me is that I've learned to recover pretty well. So every morning when I had to start the next day's run, I wasn't feeling stiff or sore or physically painful because I had trained well enough to be able to do that. The other thing that was difficult, like going through 3 different phases, was you cannot, when you train for an event, you will start off with your base training and you'll increase the intensity of your training until you peak, and then you'll do a taper. Now, when you do an event where you're going to run 3 months worth of marathons, you cannot start at the peak. So you have to be undertrained when you start and use the first part of the event as training, which means that you are unfit and undertrained when you start. So that's quite a painful exercise to go through when you're doing these long distances where pretty much the joints start hurting, especially at my age, the joints from old sports injuries. So at the beginning, there was a lot of joint pain. Your muscles get used to it, your body gets used to it, your mind gets used to it, but then you start to taper again towards the end, where eventually your body is starting to wear down and wear down and wear down, and then it starts to get painful again. So it's a kind of a bath curve. I could share many other incidents with you, but I'm sure that's good enough for this question.
Yeah, sure. Going on to personal goals, right? And when you have broader objectives like you had, it wasn't only about completing, a marathon day for 3 months. There were more complex, intricate, because you needed sponsorship, you need a support team to also make sure they were satisfied, and all these moving parts. If it was just you running with the support, with different story. If you had entered a race, for example, a marathon, but certainly there were bridges that you needed to, build to cover gaps. And these lessons for future endeavors, what are your take-home points?
There were quite a lot, actually. With regard to the questions you're going to ask me, I'm sure you're going to touch on something else that I've mentioned to you previously when we spoke about this interview, and that's that, strange enough, I regard the whole event as a failure, even though it's a personal achievement. I'll talk about that later. One of the things that I have learned from that exercise personally is, as you say, mixing personal goals with the broader overall picture, is to take everything into consideration as well. So what I tried to do initially was be very inclusive of everyone and allow everyone who is supporting me and doing the event with me to have their fair share of input. And the mistake that I made was to then ignore my own strengths in organizing ability. Having spent 25 years in the IT industry as a project and program manager, as you can imagine, I have certain organizational abilities. And the things that I learned afterwards that I advise other people not to ignore, which I did, was at times I wanted to avoid conflict, so I'd let certain things ride rather than dealing with them at point. There were times when there's no doubt I should have aborted the event, but I continued, and the main reason for that was pride. There were times where I can be a very controlling, authoritative person, as you could imagine, being a project and program manager. But I avoided controlling and I allowed other people to do things. And because I didn't exercise any control, there were often things that fell over and weren't done correctly or completely, etc. And then the last personal failure was many of those things that I allowed to happen was because I wanted to be liked. I wanted people to have fun and to like me, and we all have a good event. And so you can hear that there's quite a lot of, there's the overall event that needs to be controlled and needs to be organized possibly. And then there's the personal feelings and the personal, you know, pride and wanting to be liked and avoiding conflict. And you have to have a very good balance between the two of those to make sure that everything can run smoothly, because it's the event that counts, like a project, rather than personal feelings.
Putting your personal feelings on hold, that's emotion management, emotion control.
And well, once you've decided on a project goal, then that's the whole point of the exercise, is the project goal. You can't then start, you know, something that I was very good at when I was a project manager is scope creep. You can't have scope creep. Once you set the project goal, you stick to it. And the scope creep comes in when you allow the personal emotions and feelings to get involved.
Yeah, it's almost going into the supermarket for bread, and you come back with a full trolley. You come out scope creep. Anyway, so reflecting on this mega marathon, mentioned also about failure in some regard. Could you just share a little bit more on this dual perspective? Although you completed as a success, also failure in the mouth. Is there anything more you'd like to add to that?
Yes, well, people might still be confused when they hear this, that I regard it as a failure. Well, of course, it's an immense personal achievement to be the first person on the planet to run 2,600 kilometers, in effect, a marathon every day. There are 3 little deviations to that for 3 months. So yes, it's a great personal achievement, and especially at the age that I was when I did it. But the thing was, as I mentioned in the previous answer that I gave, I'd set a goal, and the goal wasn't for me to run across Africa. The goal was for me to do something about elephant conservation and water sustainability. And the end result, I'd actually done nothing about either of those two. Yes, I'd completed the run. And then there are some other things that I've mentioned previously about why I didn't abort, and I didn't abort because of pride. Yep. So once I'm doing the run and I know I'm not going to achieve my end goal, why didn't I abort? What kept me going? And I'll share something with you later about, well, let me share with you 5 little pointers very quickly. The pointers that people can take home, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're going to start a business. There are things that you have to be careful of when you're doing something like this. So I've spoken about the planning. I'm going to use an expression from a chap called Lewis Pugh, which many South Africans will have heard of. He's a United Nations ambassador. He swims in the ice caps to try and help look after sustainability of the planet and climate change. And one of his expressions was the 7 Ps. Proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. So you have to do your proper preparation and planning.
But that we used in the Navy. In the Navy, we also used that.
How did you? It came from Lewis Pugh. I wonder if he got it from the Navy. But anyway, so as a program manager, I could have done a lot of that. I could have controlled it and made sure. But then I wanted that popularity as well, and I wanted other people to have their inputs and to feel involved. And then I trusted that other people could do all of that. And so you've got to get that balance right. When you've got staff and employees, you've got to be careful with the total control to empowerment. The second factor is cash flow. And this is probably the biggest one for businesses, entrepreneurs. It's been the one that's been mentioned over millennia. And if you lose, you can have a wonderful balance sheet, but if you don't have cash flow, your business will go down. And the problem that I had with the run, and one of the main reasons why I didn't achieve the goals, was that the cash that had been promised to support us and to fund us across the entire event never came through. And I made the cardinal mistake of starting without that being confirmed. Yes, I'd been told it's 99.99% certain, but it wasn't there. and it didn't come through. So on the run, I was supposed to have a film crew and a video crew and a physiotherapist. And I said to them, don't come until we've got the money to pay you. Unfortunately, I said that because the money never came through. And when you do something like that, of course, the money runs out. There's no sponsorship, cash flow, the business goes under. The third point was people. Now, all people are good people at heart, at their core, and all people are good at what they do. So if you have people in your organization, they are good at what they do. But you have to be sure that you've got the right people at the right time. So people have different circumstances in their lives, and they're going through different things, and they have different skills and abilities, and you can't just take anybody. Good and nice as those people all are, they have to be the right people at the right time and the right circumstances. So for instance, the mistake I made was I didn't look at any CVs. I didn't meet them all. I just got references and I said, right, that's it, let's go. I didn't do my people, my mistake. Yeah. Wonderful people as they were, I made the mistake of wrong circumstances for some of the people at the wrong time. The fourth one is purpose. So I had a purpose. I had a goal that I wanted to achieve, and I'd mentioned it to the crew and the team that was coming with me, but they didn't share it. If your people in your organization don't have the same purpose, you cannot hand down, like many organizations will have a vision statement. You can't just hand down a vision statement to all your employees and say, there it is, go for it. They've got to buy into it. And if they don't buy into it, you're working against each other. And that pretty much happened on the run. I had this vision statement and goal and purpose, and they liked it, but they didn't share it. They had other agendas in their lives. Nothing wrong with that, but I had failed to see it until too late. And then the last one that I'll share with you is flexibility. Your business has to have flexibility. My project should have had flexibility and it didn't. I had a specific goal and I had a way of doing it and it wasn't flexible enough. I could actually have aborted a month after starting, or a few weeks, or halfway, and gone back later and finished once everything had sorted out. Classic examples of flexibility are companies such as Sony and Kodak and Blockbuster Video and Nokia, and they haven't had flexibility over the years to adapt the product that they were selling, so they failed. And that's why one of the reasons that I failed is that there wasn't enough flexibility or even a plan B planned into the event. I think that's enough to answer the question.
Very good. On parting shot.
Yes.
Your top three, or the three tips that come to mind for people to increase their mental toughness so that whoever may need it can start applying it in their life.
Okay, very good question. And I'm glad you've asked this one. It's something that I do a lot of. As you know, I'm a life coach, a leadership coach. And pretty much the core and the essence of all the coaching that I do is mind training. And this is the problem that pretty much everyone in life has. Well, I say pretty much everyone, that's a little bit rough. Many people have this problem. If you had to make a list of all the activities that you follow during your daily routine, or anybody does that, you will find that almost none of those. I'll be very surprised if in any of those you find mind training. Mind training is things like mindfulness, meditation, practicing, using your mind. So one of the things that I did when I trained for this event and a previous event, which was the Namib Desert Challenge, was I would train for pain. So I would teach my mind, I'm going to go through pain, so that I know how to cope with it. So I'd go out there when I was injured, when the weather was at the worst, when I was tired and sore and not feeling like it, and unhappy and sad, and I would go and do a 3-hour run. And I would be doubly sad and unhappy, and I'd be crying at times. I'd be so unhappy, but I would train for that pain. You've got to train your mind. It doesn't just happen naturally. And we spend very, very little time training our mind. There are other things that you can do, like I do on the run. I have a routine that I follow where when the going gets tough, I have a process that I follow, which means the process was I needed a mental break. So as I'm running, I knew that an hour after the start of the run, I would be walking. I was going to walk for the time that took me to have a salt tablet, a little bit of nutrition, a sip of water, a little sweet, a gummy bear or an energy bear, and a little bit of an energy bar. And as long as I took that, I'd be walking, I'd have a break from the running. And that mental break was useful. I have other routines that I follow on the run, like specific songs that I sing, and I take my mind off somewhere else and I do a body scan. And so when, for instance, I'm getting tired and I'm starting to feel that I want to give up. And I say to myself, okay, so I want to give up. So what's hurting? And I do a body scan, and then my toes aren't sore and my feet aren't sore, and I've got a bit of a muscle ache, and my back isn't hurting, and my shoulders aren't hurting, and I'm not breathless. And I'm saying to myself, so if nothing's really hurting too badly, why do I want to give up? And it's my mind saying, this is tough. And then I say to myself, but I've trained for this. I've done this before. And it happened yesterday, and it's going to happen tomorrow. And so I've prepared for it. I've done mind training. And that's what people need to do in their everyday lives. Spend some time training your mind, not only to go through hardship, but for instance, an exercise in mindfulness where you are able to focus your mind on a certain thing and keep it there. Like when you're in the shower, are you actually in the shower or are you somewhere else? Is your mind taking you to, oh, when I get to work, I need to do this. And I need to do this. And I'm going to listen to this podcast while I'm driving to work. And you're not in the shower. Focus on the shower. Feel the water. How warm is it? How cold is it? Is the intensity a little bit hard? And, the soap. Do I smell the soap that I'm using? And the same with when you're washing the dishes. When you're going for a walk, are you actually present in nature when you're going for a walk, or are you somewhere else, etc.? The practice of being able to focus your mind on something, which gives you the ability to focus on something nice while the body's going through hardship. So these are a couple of things that I do. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this,
Yes.
as I say. I do this as a living. Mindfulness.
To be in control of your mind, to actually be present, but also to detach, whether it's listening to during a harsh period you're going through, to think of a song that creates a light atmosphere. Do you have any songs that you think of in such times?
I have two, which I'm laughing at because if you know of the group called the Traveling Wilburys, so there are two songs of theirs that I use, and it's a bit humorous because the first one that I sing it's called "She Loves You," and the way that they wrote this song, by the way, I listened to an article, a video from George Harrison, who brought the Traveling Wilburys together, and as you know, it's Bob Dylan and Tom Petty.
The other guy.
Well, he's the most famous singer of all, and the one that they were scared of, and he died. And how can I not remember his name? And they'll come back to me. Anyway, so they each had a magazine, and they'd say, "She loves you," and then they'd read something out of the magazine, and then that were the words of the song. So I sing that, and I sing that as a body scan. She loves your toes, she loves your dodgy ankles, she loves your tight calves, she loves your dodgy knees, and I sing that song, and then I'll switch to the next song, which is also Traveling Wilburys, which is "Congratulations for carrying me this far. Congratulations, you really are a star." So I put my own words in and I sing these two songs, and I have a little bit of a giggle, and before I know it, I've traveled another kilometer or two singing these two songs, and it takes my mind away. Little mindfulness technique that I use, which lightens the moment and takes my mind away from the pain that I'm going through.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Thank
Roy
you.
Orbison.
Roy Orbison, that's it.
And the other guy is the leader of the band called ELO. Is it Glenn? Sorry, I can't remember his name. Anyway,
I'm gonna look it up straight after this.
Yeah.
And look out for that song also. Thank you, Jon. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing, and so that others can be enhanced and enabled in their own daily life.
Well, I'm glad that I've had this interview. I thank you as well. It's been great chatting to you, and you've asked me some great questions. So I hope the people who hear this get a few tips to help them in life. That's what I'm here for.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Claudio. All the best.
All the
Cheerio.
best. Cheers.